Hi there guys, welcome to the video. In this video we're going to be installing a 4-in-1 ESC in this 7-inch quadcopter. This is the perfect cinematic high-speed quadcopter we're building here. I've already done a review of this frame and you have already seen a review of these motors, and while I don't even know at this point in the recording if the quadcopter will fly. Yeah, probably it will fly. And again, if you are watching this video you will have already seen a review of these Zing 2 motors from iFlight. So again, we're going to be installing a 4-in-1 ESC, and that 4-in-1 ESC is part of this stack from Rush. Basically that means that I'm going to take you on a tour of the installation of the 4-in-1 ESC. How I install a 4-in-1 ESC, what checks I do and such. Here we go!
You serious?
First of all, I want to tell you that this video is sponsored by RushFPV. They sent me this stack. And it's not a review, so yeah, I don't even have to be biased or unbiased, it doesn't matter, it's a how-to. So again, thank you very much RushFPV for providing us with this stack, right? And that doesn't mean, by the way, that these aren't good stacks or that I wouldn't choose these stacks if I wasn't sponsored. In fact, let me show you one of my other quadcopters. This is one of my 5-inch quadcopters. And you can tell from the red gummies, and maybe you can even recognize the PCBs. This is also a Rush stack. Oh, and by chance also a RushFPV VTX. Also, you probably already know that RushFPV makes quality components. So in a perfect build, these are well at home. Okay, so this box over here contains the flight controller. We'll take a look at the flight controller in a separate video. However, I do want to show you something. And again, you'll see that in my installation video, if you will, of this flight controller. It is very well protected. That is one of the reasons why I chose this stack for my other builds. I have 2 other 5-inch quadcopters with these stacks already. And you do have the option of soldering on cables, as you can tell. These solder points are all at the bottom. But for the rest you have connectors. So that does make installation a lot easier. And the PCB, all the components are protected by this aluminium, I presume, plate. That is not for heat dissipation, no. And probably also not for RF shielding. It is aluminium, it's light. This is not a heavy flight controller. I must say that I haven't had that happen often, but I have had parts, electronics from my flight controller being bumped off by branches, for instance. So that won't happen with these flight controllers. Again, we'll take a close look at the flight controller in a separate video. The 4-in-1 ESC. And same deal, as you can tell, fully enclosed. Well, fully enclosed. All components of the 4-in-1 ESC are protected by an aluminium plate bottom and top. And also the manual is, manual. All the connector points over here are labeled on that piece of aluminium. So in the case of the flight controller, this isn't for heat dissipation. However, on the 4-in-1 ESC, I think that this is the top. This plate will play a role in spreading out the heat, because it is glued onto the fets, which are right underneath these parts over here. So protection and a bit of heat management, I guess. Alright, what more do we get? We get a capacitor, a 35 volt, 470 microfarad capacitor, so that's good. We get a wire harness and another wire harness. As you can tell, one is long and one is short. I will actually be using the longer version, but more on that in a second. We got the red gummies that you saw a minute ago in my 5-inch build. Also, this part is a ripple filter. So this, in case you don't know, does more or less the same as the capacitor, but these are lower capacity but faster. For as far as I know, right? I'm not an electronics expert, but this is an extra step to smooth everything out, the voltage that goes into your 4-in-1 ESC. And so I will definitely be installing that. And okay, we get some decals, which is always appreciated. And that's it. And after you're done, these containers do come in handy. They interlock, as you can see. I do use these, so that's definitely nice. Alrighty guys, the next step will actually be soldering up an XT60 to our power leads. It's this stack from Rush does not come with power leads or an XT60, just so you know. In case you are planning a build with this stack, you'll have to supply your own cabling and an XT60. No biggie, of course. So what I always do is use a spare piece of wire with a counter plug for an XT60. Put that onto the XT60 that we're going to solder the wires to. This will make sure that the plastic doesn't melt, or if it does melt, it stays in the shape it's supposed to be in. Right, this counter plug grips onto the plastic housing of the XT60, but also to the metal, the actual prongs. Okay, let's fire up our soldering iron here. Get that nice and toasty. I'm using a 6S Lipo here. Okay, soldering tin, and what I also do is take a piece of a plier, right, and a rubber band on it, and I'll grip the plugs with that, like so. Why? Well, this will basically be a third hand, but also that rubber prevents this plier from skidding around. Okay, let's do the ground first. No real reason. Is this the ground? Yeah, that's the ground. So I'm gonna first pre-tin the wire. My soldering iron is set to 390 degrees Celsius, in case you were wondering. Okay, so get that wire soaked in soldering iron, soldering paste, soldering tin. Ah, cheeky day. Soaked and nice and shiny. Okay, next thing, I'll put some solder tin on the plug itself, the XT60. Not a whole lot. Basically what I have on the wire already is more or less enough. And that's it. Right. I make sure that every part of what I'm soldering is nice and toasty, and then I push things together. And well, I don't like saying that of my own work, but this is kinda perfect. This will never come out again. Alright, positive side, here we go. Pre-solder the wire again. Okay, making sure that there are no cat hairs that might short things out. We wouldn't want that. Looks like I went a little bit overboard on the stripping of this wire. Some of the actual power lead metals was cut as well. Doesn't matter, this cable is more than thick enough. But yeah, I should have done a better job stripping the wire. Okay, that's pre-tinned. Let's pre-tin. As you can tell, I'm positioning things so I can reach things easily. You don't want to start the solder job and then find out that you can't reach things. And I noticed that the wire isn't soaked enough in solder tin. Okay, let's pre-tin the connector. There, that's more than enough. Slide in the wire and hot cheeky day. Pretty nice. Pretty nice. Alright, next thing we'll need to do is put this protective cap on the XT60, of course. But also if you are building along and also building a Caddx Machineworks Banggod, you'll have to slip this rubber washer onto the wire. This will lock into the top plate, right? Making sure that the wire doesn't rub onto the frame. So be sure to put that on the wire right now. Otherwise you won't be able to. Okay, so now I should be able to just pull these wires apart, and I can. So this tests our soldering job, but also I know that well, things aren't stuck together in any way. Okie dokie, again that's a protective cap on, like so, and our rubber washer. I definitely don't want to forget the rubber washer. Oh, apparently the cabling I'm using is thicker than Caddx Machineworks expects. It is a bit thick. And what is this? 12 AVWG, which is pretty thick. The next thing I want to do is solder up our power leads to a 4-in-1 ESC. And these wires, the power leads, aren't all that long. They will be long enough, but there's not a whole lot of room to spare, which I like, by the way. But that will force me to not solder them on straight, like so. But I'm gonna give them a little bit of an angle, so they'll be pointing the right way already. Yeah, so that means that I'll have to make the positive wire a little bit shorter than the ground. Yeah, a little bit, not a whole lot. Like that. Like, what is that? Half a centimeter or so. So I'm gonna... Okay, that went flying. Okie dokie, so let's strip these wire ends. And this time be a little careful not to strip too much off. Yeah, that was better than last time. And let's see if I can do the ground the correct way as well. Okay, damn it, too careful. Yeah. Alright, okay, curl the wires up a little, or curl the wires up, twist the wires around a little, then fire up the soldering iron. Hachikide. I always have a plier ready for this job, a little nose needle. I always have a plier ready for this job, a little okay, for this job I always have a plier ready, a little needle nose plier to grip the wires in case it's well, an inconvenient spot or something like that, or there's some kind of tension on the wire maybe. So yeah, but ideally you want to hold the wires with your hand so you have optimal control. Okay, so let's pre-tin these wires first. By the way, I'm gonna solder up the capacitor to the bottom of the pads of the 4-in-1 ESC. And you'll see that in a second. And I'll also show you why. Well, mostly it's to prevent the capacitor from getting in the way of these power leads, which are again a little on the short side. Okay, I'm being liberal with my soldering tin always on the power leads. Not sure why in the past, in a distant past, when I wasn't all that good at soldering, yeah, even worse than I am now, I had some power leads come loose. That's a distant memory, but I didn't have good equipment, at the time either, but that has me always a little bit worried for the power leads to come off. Okay, let's pre-tin the pads. So yeah, I'm being liberal with solder tin always in this part of the job. It also works, by the way. I've on my drones I have never had power leads come apart or fall off or anything else desolder themselves. So I guess it works what I do here. Okay, so again a little bit of an angle, and yeah, these wires will get hot, so I'll grip them with my pliers. And okay, so a little bit of an angle. Okay, I'm gonna preheat the pad again, then the wire. Okay, so I'm actually already done. This looks great. Yeah, but what I could have also done if this doesn't work, if for instance the 4-in-1 ESC starts walking away on me, I could just put it in the frame and use the frame as a helping hand, if you will. But I'm gonna try to get it done like so. This way I'll also know that there's no undue stress on the cable. And looks like I'll be able to do this. Okay, so I'm gonna reheat the pad and the wire and push them together. Okay, so yeah, this worked out pretty well. It's not the most beautiful job, so I might redo it. But the connection looks great. It's a little bit offset, but again, the connection is great. It's on the edge of the pad, but this will work. Again, if this wouldn't work, I just simply put the 4-in-1 ESC in the frame and use the frame as a helping hand. Alright, and you will probably notice that I did redo that soldering job. It wasn't really neat. Yeah, that's what happens when you've got a camera pointed at your fingers, right? But it's now neatly in the middle and mechanically very well connected. So next thing we'll do is install our capacitor. Make sure to have the all capacitors basically have a marking on one side. Maybe it's a colored marking like red. This time it's a white band, as you can see. And that marks the ground. Yeah, and the positive side is most of the times unmarked. So again, that's the ground part. And I'm gonna be soldering the capacitor to the bottom. Again, because that leaves us more wiggle room for our cabling. And I'm gonna have a look how long the prongs need to be. As short as humanly possible. Preferably as short as possible. And I've curled them up a little bit. This way I'll have more of a mechanical contact with the solder pad, right? Okay, so let's pre-tin those curled up ends. Okay, HQprop, nice blobs of solder on those. And let's add a little bit more solder to the bottom of the pads, only a little bit, making sure that I don't unsolder the power leads. HQprop. Okido, and let's place that capacitor. HQprop, 1 done. 2 done. Okay, have a good look around to see if the solder job looks decent. It actually does look decent. Okay, that should be done. Yeah, cool. Okay, and that's almost all the work. Well, actually, no, let's pre-tin all the motor pads. Will I? Well, the ESC will wiggle around. I will do that with the ESC in the frame. So, what do we have here? We have a 4-in-1 ESC in the frame. The capacitor is actually resting in this TPU printed block over here. It's almost perfect. Yeah, it's being held in place. It can't go anywhere, it can't flop around. Great. And the power leads will fold like so. After I'm done with the motor wires, right? It won't be in the way like so, but it actually fits. Okay, so let's pre-tin the motor wires. Why don't we? Okay, I'm gonna simply be laying down a puddle of solder onto the 12 motor pads, right? That's what I'm gonna do. Nothing out of the ordinary. So a puddle, you say? Yeah, a puddle so that I can later on press the motor wires into that puddle, sealing things nicely. So usually this looks a little bit more than needed, but a nice bubble you definitely need. And also you want to be relatively quick about it. You don't want to overheat or heat your 4-in-1 ESC more than needed. And practice, right? This simply needs practice. And there are practice soldering boards to help you practice. Also, these solder bubbles, solder pools should look nice and shiny. And again, they should look like a bubble. There shouldn't be a tear on them or anything. That if you get tears, spikes on them, that usually means that your soldering iron is too cold. And I won't demonstrate what that looks like. Again, as you can hopefully see, it doesn't take more than a second per solder pad. And again, you do that to minimize the heat you put into your 4-in-1 ESC. And now I'm checking all pads to see if all of them have a nice bubble, and I see one that doesn't, so I'll add a little bit more to that one. There you go. Oops, now it's okay. All right. This one, when touching it up, went non-shiny, matte, a matte finish, which is a cold solder joint, so that's definitely not what you want. Okay, now I can power down my soldering iron, because we'll now have to make the motor wires to length. Now I could, ordinarily I'd curl them up over the 4-in-1 ESC, kind of like this. However, this ESC is a little bit thicker than usual with its protective plates. Yeah, and also this frame is a little bit bigger. I usually curl the wires over the 4-in-1 ESC so that I don't grab onto the wires when grabbing my quadcopter, never putting mechanical stress on the wires. However, this is such a big quadcopter, there's all kinds of spots that you can pick it up from. So what I'll probably do is solder the wires on like so. Right straight onto the pads. Yeah. Will I? Maybe a little curve, but yeah, I will probably be doing this straight onto the pad. Yup. In my 5-inch builds I did curl up the wires, and yeah, again that protective plate gets in the way a little bit. Also, that's a little bit hard to show you, but it becomes hard to have the wire reach down to the pad because of that plate, right? It's not a level, a flat plate, this 4-in-1 ESC. So I cheated a little bit. I skipped a part. Yeah, I did solder up this bank of motors, these two motors, just to see if I was happy with the wire routing as it is now. And yeah, I did try to wrap the wires over the 4-in-1 ESC. Didn't really work out. The wires combined would be wider than the lower part of this shielding, making the ESC thicker than I want it to be. So okay, so I have 2 more motors to do, and what do you actually do? Well, you first cut your wires to the length you think you need. Personally, I always end up needing a couple of millimeters more than I think. So when snipping off the wires, I add 2 millimeters. That works out for me. Okie dokie, and after that you need to strip the wire ends, right? Otherwise you can't solder things. And how much do you actually need to snip off? Well, if you have a look at those solder pads that you pre-tint, those are approximately 4 millimeters in width, 4 or 5 millimeters I'd say. So that's what you need. That's what the amount of wire you need to remove from the motor wire ends. So let's do that. And how do you do that? Well, I have a side cutter, as you can hopefully see. A very sharp side cutter, and what I do is I measure out approximately 4 millimeters. Then I press that wire cutter into the silicone wire protection, and I rotate the wire a little bit, and obviously you don't want to press down hard, otherwise you'll cut the entire wire, but a little bit of pressure, and then rotate the wire a little bit, and then pull off the insulation. And if you've never done this, you've just removed pieces of wires right from the motor wires, and so you can practice on these spare or those wires you can use to practice on. Do 12 practice wires, and if they're all good, then you're done, then you're ready for the big time, and otherwise practice some more. Yeah, that's what it's like, right? Okay, almost done. Alright, and when I'm almost done, I fire up my soldering iron so that it'll be ready when I am ready. Alright, check day, 1 more to go. I must say this is always a bit of a scary job, because if you mess up, then yeah, you've got motor wires that are too short, right? Yeah, okay, so then twist the ends a little bit, so you don't have cat hairs that will short circuit to the other pads, and otherwise make sure that there are no stray wires in your cable ends. Okido, and now we're gonna pre-tin those wires, and what I do is I make sure that they stay where you want them to be. Hopefully you can see that I will be able to access all these 3 wires like this. Just experiment a little bit, and you will find a way to. In fact, my hands are even in the way of myself. I can't see what I'm doing apparently. Alright, one more to go. That last one was a bit tricky somehow. I'm not sure why, but okay. Last one to go. Here we go. Okie dokie. Cool. Okay, so I do actually have to still solder on this ripple filter, right? I did add a wire, well, a positive and a ground wire to the filter, but I haven't stuck it down into the quadcopter yet. At this point, however, I do want to test things, the motors. And, well, actually all my soldering I've done so far. I did visually inspect things. I've used a multimeter, but mostly the visual inspection is, well, in my case I've built a lot of quadcopters, but if you are uncertain, use a multimeter and maybe a smoke stopper. I don't have a smoke stopper actually, but yeah. Again, if you are uncertain about your soldering job, you might want to use a smoke stopper. And what I'm doing now is adding the flight controller, otherwise I can't spin up my motors. Well, could I? Well, I'll be using Betaflight to spin up my motors, so you won't really need to be able to see the screen, I think, but I'm starting Betaflight and hooking up the flight controller via a USB cable. And okay, my computer is connected. Okay, to spin up the motors I will need to add a Lipo. No matter how good your soldering is, you will need a Lipo to spin up your motors. Okay, make sure that your motors run freely, that your USB cable isn't snagged, or the the Lipo. So now I'm actually moving to the motors tab. And okay, I'm telling Betaflight that I know what I'm doing. I'm a trained professional, you know. Okay, and spin up the motors one by one. And you can probably hear and see that this motor is now spinning. Yeah, that's 1 of 4. Second one. Gorgeous. No stuttering. If you see a motor stutter in your build, that's probably a sign of one of the motor wires not soldered on correctly, or that there's a short between the motor wires. Okay, third motor. Probably out of focus for you, but you can hear it. Okay. And the last one. Hot chickadee. Great. So obviously the 4-in-1 ESC is soldered up apparently correctly. The connection to my flight controller works. And the motor order is incorrect, by the way. This was the first motor, this was the second one, this was the third one, this was the fourth one. And that's incorrect because I rotated. I've got the 4-in-1 ESC front to back, right? I will cover that in a short video about my Betaflight setup. So that's actually pretty easy. Actually, Yeah, no, I'll cover that in my Betaflight setup. It's easy, especially in the latest Betaflight. It is very easy to change your motor order. Again, in a future video. For now, this is basically the how-to on soldering up your 4-in-1 ESC. In the next video, I'm gonna, well, solder. It's mostly plug and play, this flight controller. But I'll show you what's involved with this Rush Blade F722 Digital. Coming up shortly. If you are left with questions, don't hesitate to ask. For now, I want to thank you for watching. Catch you in the next video. Bye.